The death has occurred of Irish broadcasting colossus Gay Byrne at the age of 85. His career spanned over 6 decades, and he hosted The Late Late Show for an incredible 37 years. There are so many massive moments that occurred on Gay Byrne's shows, on radio and on television. Examples on The Late Late Show that I can think of include an interview with Gerry Adams in 1994, another with Annie Murphy, who had had an affair with Bishop Eamon Casey, and of course on his last show on The Late Late, he was presented with a Harley Davidson by Bono and the lads of U2. Everyone I've heard talking about Gay Byrne in the last few hours has had warm words to say, and two such people that I spoke to were Seán O'Rourke and Caroline Murphy. Here is the conversation I had a couple of hours ago with Seán O'Rourke. Okay, Seán O'Rourke, thank you very much for joining me over the phone. How well did you know Gay Byrne?
I knew him not particularly well. I suppose our paths used to cross in RTÉ quite a bit, especially when I began in the late 1980s in the newsroom. And he would be generally going from his office in the Late Late Show across to the radio centre when I would be arriving for work. We'd exchange a polite hello, that kind of thing. And then occasionally I'd meet him. I would have attended a talk that he gave to a producer's course I was doing when he talked about, well, just what presenters need from producers, and also some of his run-ins with the bosses in RTÉ and how to deal with them.
Funny you mentioned that. Go on.
He was somebody who was greatly admired by colleagues and also by the people of Ireland, because without question, he was the most popular, he was the most professional, he was the most influential broadcaster that this country has had. But at any time, and he had an incredibly long career for over 50 years between television and radio. He presented The Late Late Show, which was and remains the dominant television program in Ireland. He presented that for 37 years.
Ryan Tuberty said, it's funny, he told you who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, and he would always give a hand to younger presenters.
That's true. He wasn't somebody I ever had occasion to go for advice, but indirectly, I got word that when I took on the radio show in the mid-morning, the Today with Seán O'Rourke program, 6 years ago, that he was impressed by my work, and that was an encouraging thing to hear.
And what is your most memorable interview that you ever saw him conducting? Is there one that sticks out? Like, I can think of the one with Gerry Adams in 1996, I think it was.
Interestingly, the one with Gerry Adams was in 1994, just after the ban on interviewing IRA members or Sinn Féin members was lifted. And I heard him talking about that afterwards, and he was somebody who was no fan of he despised the IRA. I think that was well known. But he wanted to extend the normal courtesy to Gerry Adams, but he was quite angered by the fact that he was told by his bosses in RTÉ not to shake hands with them, and he thought that was just a break with the normal courtesy that you extended to a guest on the Late Late Show. But it was something that he had to abide by at the time. But he was someone who had a great range of skills. He was a great listener, and he could get to the heart of something just with a really simple question. And also, I heard somebody say earlier today, and I think this is true, he was somebody who could use silence very effectively, that if he got maybe a short or an inadequate answer, he didn't rush to fill the silence. And that, if you like, put the onus on his interviewee to say something else, and maybe sometimes they said more than they might have wished or intended to.
Absolutely, and funnily enough, just on that Gerry Adams thing, apparently it kind of backfired, and Gerry Adams' support and respect grew as a result of that treatment, which is interesting, and it did him a huge favour. But
yeah, but I mean, Gerry Adams was and remains a consummate performer from the point of view of Sinn Féin. He's very sure of his ground. He's very sure of his argument. He's very deft in the way he handles things. I mean, and Gay Byrne or anybody else is never going to, land, if you like, a knockout punch on somebody like Gerry Adams.
I think it's fair to say that Gay was an integral part of Irish and modernisation. in the latter part of the 20th century, and he continued to work into his illness. Is that correct? And he persevered where many would hang up the headphones, as it were, and he kept on going.
Yeah. The last time I met him was about this time last year, in fact, and he was walking, I suppose you could nearly say, shuffling through Harbour Park in Dublin, and I just happened to bump into him. He was out for a walk on a Friday afternoon with, at least I think it was a Friday afternoon with Kathleen, maybe about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he was just saying how he would love to get back broadcasting, love to do a few more programs on Lyric, which was what he was doing most recently. And he just kind of looked at her and he said, "But they," referring to the women in his life, they won't let me. And I think, well, that was a love affair that went on they were married for over 55 years. And I suppose it was a measure of their relationship, a measure of their affection. That even though he would dearly have loved to do a few more programs, he also knew that he had to defer to her real knowledge of what was good and what he should do and what he was capable of.
Yes.
Maybe he could have done the program, but she was the one who knew how much it would take out of him, and just knew it just wasn't right. It was a sad kind of encounter, but it was also great and edifying just to see the regard in which they held each other.
Isn't that lovely? And I'm talking to you. I heard Joe Duffy talk earlier, Ryan Tubridy, the pair of them, just a few minutes ago, actually. And Gay Byrne, you four men are part of a generation that has enjoyed great success in our national broadcaster, and the grip that RTÉ has on the media and on journalism and broadcasting in Ireland isn't as strong now as it was when you might have started out or when Gay was in his prime. So can you talk a little bit about that change and how RTÉ has to adapt to the new media, and how is RTÉ dealing with that? And it's very difficult financially and all that.
Well, I suppose the first thing about it is that RTÉ was the only show in town. It was the only show in the country for a lot of the Irish audience. I mean, for instance, there was only one television channel it was one single channel, and it was called, for vast swathes of this country. If you weren't close to the border, you could get BBC. There in Dublin, where you could pick up BBC. You basically had RTÉ, and that was that RTÉ2 television came along in the 1970s. And there was only RTÉ Radio 1 until the late 1970s. And Gay, if you like, he had huge audiences. Gay had, on his radio show, he had up to 800,000 people listening to him, which is more than double what any program has now, with the possible exception of Morning Ireland. And also, there was just, if you were watching television in large parts of the country, you were watching the Gay Byrne, the Late Late Show presented by Gay Byrne. Which came on, and it was a kind of a national, if you like, it was like almost a kind of a town hall, where people came and went. There was entertainment, somebody would have to sing a song, there would be a ground, then there would be a discussion or a debate, there would be an argument might start, people would pitch in from the audience maybe, and it was just, he just kept the conversation going. He had a great ear he was a great listener, and I think that's the first requirement in any broadcaster. It's one thing to know how to ask the questions. It's something else of equal importance, I would contend, to know how to listen to the answers. How RTÉ adapts? Well, I mean, media is changing. You know, newspapers are now doing broadcasts because, you know, people aren't actually reading newspapers, certainly not in hard copy like they were before. And there's kind of been a merging or a confluence of media. And, you know, it's also the case that, you know, maybe at a faster pace than we realised, young people are deserting traditional media, and we still are, you know, looking for ways in which to appeal to them and which to serve their needs, and that's just an ongoing battle.
And it's a tough battle that RTÉ is trying to fight, and I think it's worth pointing out, just on a personal note with Gay, his background. He came from the Liberties, and we often look at the finished product, but he had an astonishing work ethic, and the likes of the Joe Duffy, he came from Ballyfermot, and there's many more like them who have come from humble beginnings and who have risen to the national stage, and by their own hard work. Gay was a hard worker, wasn't he?
Absolutely, and I think he came from a family where it was expected that you went out and earned a living. I think in his, I think he had two autobiographies, it came through that his mother was a pretty demanding woman, and she didn't put up with any nonsense from him or his siblings. And it was expected you went out and you got a job, you fended for yourself and your family, and you didn't get anything easy. Well, you know, people didn't in those days anyway. You know, there was a kind of a certain strictness about the way people, if you like, had to go to school. There was corporal punishment. There was intolerance of if you like, lack of effort. And I suppose also there was a very strong influence of the Catholic Church, which would have influenced Gay as well.
And he presented that thing, the meaning of life. There were questions that clearly came up for him that he wanted to engage in.
And I think he was somebody who he was searching for answers, maybe from himself or for himself, as much as he was for his audience, right up till the end.
Absolutely. And how Gay clearly presented well into his older years. You are presenting, you're in your 60s, and you have had a number of shows in the past. Do you see your role changing in RTÉ in the near future, or are you sticking at it in your current capacity indefinitely?
Well,
or both.
As Donald Rumsfeld would say, there are two known unknowns in response to that question. One is, what do RTÉ want me to do? And secondly, what do I want to do myself? It's something I'm mulling over, and I think, I suppose, out of courtesy as much as anything else, it's something I should be discussing with RTÉ before I discuss it with you as to how things progress.
Okay.
Once I hit the 6'5" sometime next year.
Well, you're very good at pushing people for questions, and you're also very good at knowing how to answer a question without giving too much away. So thank you so much for your time today, and much appreciated. Talk to you soon.
Okay, good talking to you, Fergus.
Slán.
Cheers.
I also spoke to former broadcaster in RTÉ, Caroline Murphy. Caroline was a producer on Gay Byrne's radio show for a period in the 1980s, and she was able to offer some fascinating insights into what it was like to work with Gay. I'm joined now by Caroline Murphy over the phone. She worked in RTÉ in a career spanning 24 years as a broadcaster and a producer. Caroline, thank you very much for joining me. We're talking, of course, about Gay Byrne, a man who died at the age of 85. You worked with Gay as a producer. Can you tell me what you knew? How did you know Gay, and how did you see him?
Well, I worked with Gay as a producer from, I think, about 1986 to 1988, for maybe just over 2 years. And I saw him actually as the centre of Irish life. The thing I remember more than anything else was, no matter where you were out of the office, if people were talking about something, it tended to be about something that had been happening on the Gay Byrne show, and more often than not, it would be something that you might have been producing yourself, and people would be giving out about it, and you'd be wondering whether or not to admit that you were involved, or just to sort of hide behind the curtain and pretend it never happened. It was quite amazing the number of times when you'd be literally either having tea after a tennis match or out at dinner, and people of all shapes and sizes were talking about what had been on the Gay Byrne show that week and what their opinion of it was, because literally it was where Irish life was discussed.
So can you give me some examples of issues that you remember and that you had a part in contributing to?
Oh yes, I remember one in particular. We were at a dinner party with quite a high-level government advisor, and he was giving out yards about Gay Byrne promoting single motherhood.
Okay.
And the reason he was giving out was because the running item on the Gay Byrne show at that time was about a do-it-yourself wedding. Now, what had happened was a young woman had written to us, because Dear Gay was what everybody did when they had nowhere else to go. It was Dear Gay.
Yeah.
So all of human life was on the desk. Everybody's problems came into the program. But anyway, this young woman wrote in, and Dear Gay, I have 2 children, and my boyfriend and I really want to get married, but we don't have any money. Can you help? So we didn't really pay much attention to the fact that she had 2 children. She was just a girl who really wanted to get married, and they had no money. So we used her story as an example of a do-it-yourself wedding. So she got the wedding dress in a second-hand shop. She went to a pawn shop, I think, to get the rings. The girls in the office, or the ladies in the office, as Gay called us at the time, all actually came together in my house to cook the food for the wedding. We got a Christmas or a wedding cake from somewhere, I don't know where. My husband actually did photographer for her for the day. So we created this, and we produced the cheap as chips do-it-yourself wedding, because we were trying to combat this notion that you had to have an awful lot of money to get married, and getting married, you couldn't get married unless you were in a position to have a big party. And we were trying to say, look, this is just a passage, it's all about being married. But anyway, at the dinner party, the government advisor was going bananas, because as far as he saw it, all he heard was the girl had 2 children. So to him, the story was we were glorifying and encouraging single motherhood. And I couldn't quite understand that was nothing to do with it,
and did you,
as far as we were concerned. And maybe we should have thought about the bigger picture, but she was the one who had written in, and it seemed like a good story at the time.
And were you proud of your involvement? I'm sure you are now, but at the time, were you proud of your involvement with Gay Byrne's show?
Oh, very much so. You knew even at the time that it was because of the response. You knew it was a very important program. You also knew, it's a funny thing, it was like as if it was where people went when they know where else to go. And so the services weren't there in the same way as they are now. So there would be a constant stream of letters, things like, Dear Gay, I've been signed into a psychiatric hospital. I don't believe I should be. My family have abandoned me. I can't go anywhere else. Can you help? So it was like the center of everybody's world, really. And then people who didn't have any money would ring in, and then listeners would ring in as well and offer money. So the Gay Byrne Fund was established, and then we had the responsibility for actually administering the fund. And we did actually, while I was there, we did make the decision to get somebody to come in with the specific job of making the decisions and administering the fund. And we brought somebody in, and as it happened, she moved from fund administrator to researcher to producer, and she became one of the longest standing producers on the Gay Byrne show, a woman called Alison Sullivan. She still works in RTÉ, but she was a really solid part of the Gay Byrne show for many years after I left.
Well, that's a lovely little thing to hear, and that you don't hear when you're talking to the other stars. You know, I heard on RTÉ on the 6-1 News they had Tuberty and Duffy talking about the public impact of Gay Byrne, but really you have that behind the scenes perspective, which I'm very lucky to be able to access. Right now, people aren't listening to the radio like they used to, or at least they're not listening to RTÉ1 in the numbers that they used to, and they're not watching the Late Late Show in the numbers that they're used to, because they're watching Netflix, or they're listening to Joe Rogan, or whatever they're doing. And there's a huge amount of competition that didn't really exist at that time, and RTÉ is under huge stress right now to adapt. Can you talk a little bit about that as you see it, and the changing face of Irish media which you have seen?
Well, obviously, it's much more split, much more disparate. There's huge competition. But the one thing that you do have now that we didn't have is the ability to listen back. So,
Playback.
And that means, and also the whole social media thing, you can have a huge influence, but in a different way. So at the time, everybody who hears now about the fact that, for example, all the Anne Lovett letters were read on the Gay Byrne show, and that was a seismic time for Irish radio. At that time, though, you were only reading about that or reading the letters in retrospect, perhaps, if you hadn't heard the programme. There would have been playback, I'm sure, and it would have been on playback. But again, playback was only on the Saturday. Whereas now, if something seismic like that happens, it tends to get talked about and rehashed and reheard
and shared,
repackaged and shared in different sort of ways. So the influence is not the same, but influence of radio and television can still be huge.
And go on, sorry.
In a slightly different way.
And the irony of that, it's funny, I thought of something myself that you were talking about playback, and I was an enjoyer of playback with Marion Richardson, but from South Carolina using the RTÉ Radio app. So it's the two things at play. And also,
exactly.
I remember hearing a John Bowman program that was dedicated to Gay Byrne about a year ago, or might have been 2 years ago, around Christmas time, and again recorded, and I listened to it using an app on my iPhone, so I suppose there's positives and negatives to everything.
Exactly.
But RTÉ is trying to kind of adapt in that way, and you saw both sides, I suppose, the old and the new. So thank you for your contribution. Just last thing I'll ask you, what was Gay like personally, like as a man who you met and one-to-one, as opposed to who you heard on the radio or on the TV?
He was a man who pretended he didn't smoke, but every single day at the end of the program would get somebody to give him one cigarette, because you were allowed to smoke inside then. He was very pleasant. He was, I found, very interested. There was quite a young team of women on the program at the same time as me. Cathy Moore was a very smart researcher. Anne-Marie Harahan, the journalist, was there at the time. She was brilliantly witty and brilliantly clever. She was the one who coined the phrase, the ladies in the office. She used to write all these scripts for Gay about the ladies in the office. And we got on very well with him. He was interested in us. I often felt we represented to him in some ways what his daughters might grow up to be in a way. I think he was very much a man's man. Even though, Kathleen had clearly had a wonderful broadcasting career herself, Kathleen Watkins, but Gay still lived in an Ireland where men were very dominant in most occupations.
Yes.
And I sometimes thought that he was interested in us from the point of view of, these people are my daughters. In 10, 15, 20 years, Ireland should change so that my daughters can have a better, fairer shake.
Well, that's a fascinating observation to make. And as you saw it, how was it being a woman? You have a funny story. I don't know if you want to share it, but about someone when you were reading the sports news on the radio as a woman. Do you mind sharing that with me?
Yes, I got a job as a sports reporter when Radio 2 FM started off. And there were four of us. I don't think I ever would have got the job in a fit if there'd only been one job going. But because there were four jobs going, I think A couple of the people in RTÉ thought this was an opportunity to show just how futuristic they were and how liberal. And I got one of the jobs. And there were lots of lovely people in sport at the time. They'd been there for many years. But over tea one night, one of the sub-editors, a really nice guy, just said to me one night, God, I'd find it really hard to believe the racing and the dogs' results if they were read by a woman. It just wouldn't feel right.
Yeah.
So, like, sorry, excuse me, you're talking about me. You're telling me that if I said so-and-so won at 11 to 10, you wouldn't believe me because I'm a woman? I mean, spare me.
And it's laughable, but that's kind of how people thought, you know, in a different era. And I've heard someone say that...
Yes, that's how they thought until I got there.
Until you got there. And I've heard someone say, never be too far ahead of the curve, but if you're just ahead of the curve, you'll thrive. And it sounds like you came at a great time where women were starting to be recognised, but you were still bucking the trend to an extent.
A little bit. Yes, a little bit.
And you played, as I say, a huge role in RTÉ sport, and not just in sport, but over many years. And so thank you very much for joining me to offer that insight and those memories of Gay Byrne, who died today, aged 85.